I witamy po przerwie. Mam nadzieję, że kawa smakowała i ciasteczko. Kto jeszcze na zewnątrz, zapraszamy. Mam nadzieję, że tam też mnie słychać o dołączenie. Ostatnia część naszego dwudniowego spotkania przed nami, proszę Państwa. Panel Cyber Blueprint. Wizja, konieczność i rzeczywistość. To będzie wyjątkowa na pewno okazja, żeby usłyszeć, jak eksperci z różnych krajów postrzegają przyszłość cyberbezpieczeństwa w Europie. Dyskusję poprowadzi pani Katarzyna Prusak-Górniak ze stałego przedstawicielstwa przy Unii Europejskiej, a w panelu wystąpią Stefania Ducci, Fabienne Tegeler oraz Pieter Byttebier z Belgii. Serdecznie Państwa zapraszam tutaj do nas na scenę.
Good afternoon, all. It's a pleasure to be here with such a distinguished guests. So thank you again for accepting our invitation to come to the Secure International Summit to discuss our top priority, that is the adoption of the cybersecurity blueprint. For those in the room that do not know what is a blueprint, it's a framework for cooperation between member states in case of a large-scale cybersecurity crisis, incident or crisis. We have now the blueprint from 2017, which is a Commission recommendation, but it was adopted in a totally different era. And now, because of the developments, international development, geopolitical situation, but as well plethora of legislation that we have adopted, the changes within our framework, it was the high time to review and update this 2017 blueprint, and this time in a form of Council recommendation, which is a stronger instrument, because this will mean that all 27 member states agree to the recommendations that will be there in the blueprint. So we work now as a Polish presidency on the basis of the Commission proposal, which was tabled in March. And in the horizontal working party for cyber issues, which I have a pleasure to chair, we are discussing the blueprint itself. Now we are in course of preparing REF 2 on the basis of the member states' comments and a lot of discussions that we already have. And I truly hope, and I know that also this discussion that we will have now will also feed into our thinking during the weekend, because I have to publish the REF 2 on Monday. So I really hope to get food for thought for you also to what to include and how to frame the blueprint. And we aim for the adoption of the blueprint still under the Polish presidency, formally on the 6th of June, when Deputy Prime Minister Gawkowski will chair the formal TT Council in Luxembourg. This is the formation where all ministers responsible for telecommunication, digitalization and cybersecurity will formally meet and adopt, hopefully, the blueprint. And saying that, I would like to pose the first question to all of you. So which elements of the cyber blueprint you consider the most important ones? To clarify, in order to enhance Union's readiness in case of a large-scale cybersecurity incident or crisis, and what you would see as necessary elements to be included in the blueprint. Stefania, please.
Thank you, Katarzyna, and thank you to everybody. I think that the most important element is the situation awareness. We need to have a really complete and timely situation awareness. To this end, we should take into consideration the different pieces of information scattered among different actors. Just let me remind just a few of them, in particular those envisaged by the Cyber Resilience Act of Regulation and by the EU institution bodies and agency regulation. For example, to my point of view, of course, we should take in mind For example, the severe incident and the actively exploited vulnerabilities also that were notified by the manufacturer of products with digital components to, for example, the XER designated as a coordinator, and to ENISA through the single reporting platform according to the CRA. But we should bear in mind also the biennial technical report elaborated by ENISA and containing the emerging trends in cybersecurity risk related to the product with digital components that is submitted by ENISA to the NIS cooperation group. But we should also take in mind the information that are provided by the representative of the Commission within the Interinstitutional Cybersecurity Board. Here we have also representative of ENISA, other than the European Cybersecurity Competence Center. This means that ENISA has access to such piece of information. Also because within the board, we can see that we have not only the director of the CERT-EU, but to the board meeting may also participate as observer the chairperson or their deputies of, for example, the NIS Cooperation Group, the XER network, and also EU Cyclone. So all these networks have access to this information also. And then we should keep in mind the information available to the interinstitutional cyber crisis task force established for an informed decision-making and for a truly coordinated WIBA response to cyber crisis at strategic and operational level. So this is to say that ENISA should have access to all this information and should put into system all these different elements. But another point that I would like to add is that for the sake of the cyber blueprint, we should also take into consideration the guidelines and the recommendation for a coordinated response to cyber incident and for cooperation in case of significant cyber incident contained in a report that was published by the Interinstitutional Cybersecurity Board on the 29th November of the last year, upon proposal from the CERT-EU, as it is envisaged by Article 22, Paragraph 4 of WIBA regulation. So it's just food for thought for enhancing the cyber blueprint.
Thank you very much. And indeed, the chapter on situation awareness is already heavily redrafted, and we'll work also on this because we need to put this into 3 levels: technical, operational, and political, and also situation awareness in case of peace and in case of the real crisis. So indeed, we are working on that. And maybe for those who don't know, the key actors also in the framework of the blueprint, this is the sessi network. So it's a network of sessi from all 27 member states. Then we have EU Cyclone. This is the network of crisis liaison officers, those who should coordinate our actions in case of a crisis. Then we have ENISA. ENISA is the EU agency for cybersecurity, and it acts as the secretariat of both sessi network and Cyclone, which gives them this special and unique position to combine and also to assist member states in the works of those networks. And of course, at the political level, we have the council and the formations of the council. And of course, there's a huge support from ENISA, from Commission. And as Stefania mentioned, we have this regulation for institutions where we have CERT-EU helping, but we thought that this situation awareness to the sessi network from EU IBAS will go to the sessi network by CERT-EU. So that's the thinking that we have now. But now I would like to move to Peter, please.
Yes, dzień dobry and dziękuję for inviting me to this beautiful town and this conference. Most important things for the blueprint, I think you already answered in my place. For me, it's roles and responsibilities. So for those of us who didn't get dizzy from the list of actors that you just mentioned, I would advise to read the annex to the Commission proposal. I don't know how many, but it lists dozens and dozens of different actors that are involved in dealing with the cyber crisis in general. So having a clear understanding of who does what, I think is crucial. For us, this breaks down in three sub-elements, if you allow me, several ones. It's the central place of national authorities. It's having a holistic approach to the entire crisis management. So when there is an incident in cyber, it's probably not just going to be a cyber incident. It affects different sectors. They have different actors that are at play. So having this total overview of a crisis management and understanding these horizontal interactions is important. And thirdly, making this blueprint into something pragmatic. So these are three things. You asked for like the key one. Let me underline that having this focus on national authorities, you can just mention that in the blueprint, that's easy. Having the pragmatic document with a visual, you can create that after the text is done. The key issue for us is really this horizontal interaction. I mean, all these different actors that we've mentioned so far, they will all want to do something, they will all do something. And having this understanding of how it all fits together is important. And for us, we look at the national level as a kind of inspiration for the EU level. So, because we have the same problems. We have the military, we have police, we have different sectors, we have our own agency. So how to bring this together? We solve this by creating a national crisis center and a national cyber incident crisis mechanism, where everything comes together. And then you see that at EU level, everything goes apart. There's no central thing. So using the blueprint as an opportunity to see where everything comes back together or how these different elements connect with each other is a huge opportunity. And from my agency, and I'll close with that, having a kind of, rather than having each actor interact with all the other actors individually, there is maybe an opportunity to create some form of central hub for not just cyber, but also police, military, different sectors, where all the information is brought together and taken from, just like you have a national crisis center, with the difference that at EU level you can't take these kinds of decisions. It's an information point. And unfortunately, the Union preparedness strategy that came out last week gives us an opportunity with this, how did they call it, this info hub, to bring everything together, but I think it's just timing-wise maybe too late to fit it into our blueprint, so maybe that's already food for the next one to think about. But looking at a way to solve this problem, that's key for us, I think.
We are closely also analyzing the strategies and the ways to put it there. And of course, it is already stated that first and foremost, it's national responsibility to react to the crisis, but we need to cooperate because most probably in a case of a large-scale incident, it will, by definition, it will hit more than one member state. Fabienne, I would be eager to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Katarzyna, and Dzień dobry also from my side. Thanks for inviting me, and I would like to start by saying that this is just the right time to revise the blueprint from our point of view. So with the new geopolitical situation that we are facing, this is just the right time to do that, and I would like to thank Katarzyna and the Polish presidency for the work that you're doing there. You're working hard, and we really appreciate that. So from a German point of view, we see the blueprint as a document to lay out like guidelines on cyber crisis management for the member states, how to act in case of a large-scale incident or a crisis. And I totally back what my colleagues just mentioned. I will just add some few points to that. We believe that the blueprint should be clear on the roles to take for all the actors within this field when it comes to EU cyber crisis management, and at what point mechanisms such as you mentioned, the CSIRT network, the Cyclone network, will be activated, and also when the IPCR should kick in, and this should also be tested from our point of view. We are very happy that member states' responsibilities are acknowledged and respected in the blueprint because I just back what Peter just mentioned. It's very important that the first and foremost responsibility to handle large-scale incidents or crisis is at the level of the member states. Furthermore, we like the idea of having exercises, and here to build upon those exercises that are already, that have already been tested, like for example Cyber Europe, to be as quickly as possible to also test the blueprint and exercise how it's going to work in practice, and also to look at the decision-making processes within the blueprint. A last point I would like to mention is the aspect of recovery, because whenever an incident occurs, you always have to focus on what is to be done to recover the systems and the damage that has been done. So the blueprint could also give member states guidelines on the measures that need to be taken after large-scale incidents or crises. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And indeed, the chapter on exercises is one I think that we already agreed, and I would say it's one of the easiest one. And indeed, I think most member states pointed out that we should use existing structures, existing exercises, and here again, there's a huge role for ENISA because they have very good experience when it comes to exercises. The only challenge that we will have will be to convince the political level to take part in the exercise, but here we also are thinking about some wording to encourage for this, and of course we also need to take all of us need to take the exercises quite seriously, and really when there's an exercise, engage all the people that should be there. So let's move to the second round of the questions, and here it was already mentioned, first and foremost, it's a national responsibility to react to the crisis. So what challenges do you see when you look at your national systems? And we differ, all 27 differ when it comes to national crisis management frameworks. So what challenges do you see for the blueprint in this respect? And would you see a need for alignments between member states, and if yes, of what kind? What kind of recommendation to alignments would be possible to put in the blueprint? And maybe I will start with Pieter now, please.
Yeah. To give you the simple answer, I think it's when to go to the EU and where to go to the EU as a follow-up of that. We've talked about this before last week, I think, but we're, as a member state, we're in kind of an ironic situation. Whenever there's an incident in another country that doesn't affect us, we want to know everything as soon as possible just to prepare ourselves. But when there's an incident in our own country, we want to wait as long as possible to share any information for several reasons. I mean, one, we need to know what's actually happening. We heard it in the previous panel as well. Sometimes an incident is not yet of a certain scale. I mean, if it's clearly cross-border, then of course you will go at least to the country that is also affected. But if it's not, you want to make sure that it's an actual thing and not just some false positive. There's also unintended consequences, because if you contact at technical level the CSIRT network, they will contact Cyclone will contact the political level, and suddenly the entire EU is on fire because somebody did an update wrong, and it's not really an attack, it's an incident. So we want to get things clear. And just to clarify, this is not an anti-EU attitude, it's something that we have at national level as well. Whenever the police is doing an investigation in an incident, we as a national CSIRT want to know what's happening as soon as possible, and the inverse as well. When we do something, police has already said, well, no, we want to be involved sooner, but we're like, we only got a notification, we're checking the logs, is there even a crime here? We're investigating it. So I think this is more a human nature and an organizational kind of thing. So if we could get some, maybe not agreement, but some expectation management on at what level of impact we could be reasonably expected to start sharing to a higher level, not like fixed definitions or thresholds, but like expectations. I think that would be good, and I see for the blueprint an opportunity, maybe not to clarify these expectation levels, but to point a way in doing that as a kind of a follow-up or an operational kind of thing. And then I didn't even touch on, once we know when, where do we go? There's all these different kinds of entry points in the EU and NATO, but I'll leave that for another discussion. The when is already something important, I think, and if you clarify roles and responsibilities, then the where will follow from that. I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah. Indeed, there's also a language included that we should agree on some guidelines when we are sharing. Of course, we cannot refer to the thresholds of the incidents because we differ so much. To give obvious example, in size, that we have, for obvious reasons, different thresholds, but the impact might be the way forward. And we already have some good language there after the exchanges that we had, and hopefully you will like it. Let's see next week. Fabienne, please.
Thank you. Well, I think the biggest challenge is that from our point of view, the blueprint should guide member states on what to do in case of large-scale incidents or crises, but still taking into account proportionality and subsidiarity. So cybersecurity is structured very differently in the member states. The crisis mechanisms work according to different backgrounds or ecosystems in the member states, and the responsibilities are different, and so that's already a challenge, I guess, to face and to tackle with the blueprint. ENISA having an overview of all the national crisis management mechanism structures and also points of contacts, that is a very good measure to get an overview and also to track the changes that are ongoing. As the member states are very different with regard to their capacities to deal with incidents, I guess that also their needs for support is very different, and that's also a challenge for the blueprint, I guess. Same goes for the threat scenarios ongoing, might be different in the member states. It's also something to tackle. And I guess that from our point of view, alignment doesn't really help overcoming these different settings. It's more about like bringing proportionality and subsidiarity into a balance. So to use the existing structures like the CSERT network, the Cyclone, that are already working well. And also, well, I mentioned it already several times, the subsidiarity. So whenever things should be done at a national level, this should also be just accepted and be implemented into the blueprint.
It's also those very obvious from member states' comments that the guiding principles that you mentioned, two of them, subsidiarity and proportionality, are very important. That's why we also moved them from the annex to the very beginning to have like a good start of the document, that this is indeed something that you have to have in mind when you are reading the whole text later. Stefania, eager to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. To me, the main challenge is civil-military cooperation. Because more than an alignment between among the different national cyber crisis management framework, we probably need an alignment between the actors at the EU and also national level, civilian and military actors, because as we can see, for example, while within the XUR network and the EU Cyclone, we have all member states represented. This is not the case within the Conference of Military Cyber Commanders and within the military CERT network. And this asymmetry is reflected also on the fact that, for example, while we have a high level of interaction between the XUR network and the EU Cyclone, we don't see the same between the military CERT network and the Conference Military Cyber Commander. But of course, this organizational asymmetry doesn't prevent us from thinking about a viable way of sharing effectively information with the military actors for a truly shared situation awareness. Of course, for doing this, we should clearly define the role and the responsibility of military actors and defining the perimeter of their action in order to effectively share information with them and cooperate with them. And Of course, for example, at Italian level, we think about the possible cooperation between these two different spheres. And through the legislative decree transposing the NIS 2 directive in our legislation, we can say that in case of large-scale cyber crisis, we have two National Crisis Management Authority, the National Cybersecurity Agency, so ACN, and the Ministry of Defense. And in particular, ACN is responsible for, has a role of coordinator, and is responsible for the civilian sphere, namely national resilience, while the MOD is responsible for the military sphere, namely the military defense of the state. But in order to enhance civil-military cooperation, we also foresee the possibility to deploy military personnel within our agency, also for the sake of a better cooperation in case of cyber crisis. So we probably have to think about also similar mechanism at EU level. For example, envision the possibility of inviting the chairperson of the EU Cyclone and the Conference Military Cyber Commander to each other meeting. I know that this has already happened, but maybe it should be done in a systematic way. In that case, the Conference of Military Cyber Commander would also become the natural recipient of the analysis circulated within the EU Cyclone. So this is just a proposal, and but the point is that we have to think about a possible alignment of the military and civilian architecture for crisis management.
Thank you for this input. Indeed, this is also one of the topics to solve within the blueprint, and also within the Polish presidency, this was one of the priorities to discuss this and find ways to enhance. There was a meeting of cyber commanders and cyber ambassadors where the Cyclone chair was present, and one of the topics was in fact how to enhance. And yesterday there was also a panel discussion during the Secure Summit dedicated to this topic. It's not easy to solve, but we all try to find the best ways how to do it. So now let's move to the third round, and I would like to also touch upon yet another angle for the blueprint. That would be the cooperation with the private sector. During the large cybersecurity incident of crisis, I think it was mentioned by many member states that in case of crisis, it's crucial to cooperate with the private sector. It is happening at the national level. We all have our channels to do so, but the question is, if we need something at the EU level, and how this could be done, and what incentives you would see for the private sector to do so, because we often hear that it's a little bit one-way street from the perspective of the private sector, that they share the information but they don't receive it. So I would also like to be eager to hear your thoughts on that, and maybe Stefania, if you could start.
Yeah, thank you so much. For example, at national level, we participate at the ENISA consortium that, together with the Athena consortium, we can say the test bed for the pan-European network of cyber hubs. And as envisaged by the Cyber Solidarity Atom, we are developing an hypersoc, which is a SOC potentiated through the exploitation of technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning technology. The hypersoc receive, through a machine-to-machine connection, technical data like IOC and also Yara rules and Golden Sector rules from public and also private operation. But the form of incentive that we envisaged in that case is that the more detailed the information we get from private operators and a more detailed report on the cybersecurity posture we will be able to return to them, and also with tailored recommendation how to enhance the cyber posture. And this is just an example, but we also should think about the possible role of ISAC within the cyber blueprint, because from my point of view, since there are European ISAC specific to different sectors, but they all also cooperate with each other, so they can provide, for example, cross-sectoral analysis to EU cyclone. And I would also like to mention, for example, with regard to the Cyber Solidarity Act, the Cybersecurity Reserve, where, of course, the private operators play an important role. And in that case, we should think about the possible role of ENISA, for example, in elaborating a sort of template in order to facilitate the request for assistance from the Cyber Reserve, and also to facilitate the evaluation of such requests that can be submitted, for example, through a secure platform. And in that case, maybe we can think also about a possible template that could become an annex to the cyber blueprint. That could be an idea, for example. But then I would like to remember also the role of private operators, for example, within the cybersecurity competence community of the European Cybersecurity Competence Center, because I think that they play an important role, for example, for the development of technology based on artificial intelligence that can provide the tools to cyclone for a better, coordination of response to cyber crisis, in order to have a better, also more timely situational awareness.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. Fabienne, please.
Thank you. So I totally back what Stefania just said, because I think it's good to look at the national structures, those national structures that have proven to be beneficial. So, for example, CSERT network in Germany, we have also a strong collaboration with the private sector CSERTs. This is very helpful, I guess, to look at that. But I guess that there will be a lot more work to be. There is a lot more work to be done on defining what is the private sector, because I believe it's on the one hand side, it is the providers, those who help when it comes to cyber crisis, and also customers. So I guess there is much more work to be done to define this. And in general, I believe that the incentive that you could bring in on the table is to add value for the providers. And here I would like to stress the KISS principle. Keep it short and simple, not too bureaucratic. I guess it's also very helpful to bring an added value for the private sector. And don't get lost in too many details, not go too much into different sectors, into the nitty-gritty details. Just keep it short and simple, and we have made some very good experience in including also private sector into our exercises. And I think we've already done it with Cyber Europe, and I think this is important points for the involvement of the private sector.
Yes, the wording on involving private sector in exercises is already there. Peter, please.
I mean, a lot has been said already. Working together with private sector, I think it's one of these key buzz phrases that we all like, and especially our politicians also in Belgium like to emphasize. We need to do it. But I think Fabienne was on the right track. Like, what is the private sector? All these different types of entities. But I think it's also important to distinguish in what phase they can help, in the differences between the prepare and protect phase, the detect and respond and the recover. I think sometimes it's the same companies, sometimes it's different companies doing different things, but in general, quite often they're an extension of what we as a national agency are trying to do, and they're helping us out. And I think in terms of incentives, of course, these are companies, they would like to earn money and keep a business open, but quite often you also see that not only do they really want to contribute to the whole ecosystem, something on which we can bank, they also take a lot of experience from this. I think the incentives are there. I think the setup in working together with them are there. I think we can just do more of it in each of these phases, especially recover, which I think is a purely private sector matter. at this stage, where companies come in. Sometimes we as an agency, we bring them even with us when we do incident response, and then we offer the victim, like, do you want to take this company or another one? It's free up to them. But then we leave, and then the cleanup crew, right? To be very unrespectful. But I think on certain areas, there's ways forward. And I'm very glad that the colleague from Ukraine mentioned what I think is one of the gold standards in working together with private sector in getting your government information out of there in time. Like working with providers, cloud providers or other companies to have emergency backups, something like that. That's something we can work on. But also in the prepare phase, and here I'm institutionally obliged to mention our cyber fundamentals framework, which is actually an outsourcing of supervising companies so that they take all the measures that they should be taking to prepare. And so we have this framework, it's online, it's a list of requirements, but we let external companies go check these entities, whether they're doing what they're doing. It's the certification principle, right? So I think these are like two possible ways in going forward. Another one, Stefania already mentioned it, it's the feeding into the cybersecurity alert system that we set up under the Solidarity Act, like using the potential of these cross-border cyber hubs, getting private companies their information in it, and then using that to go warn other companies through the CSIRTS network or through the national agencies or both of them together. And a final point, I think Hans mentioned it in the previous panel as well. When you have an incident, big incident, and it's one vendor or one provider that is at the cause, do they want 27 plus interlocutors or just one? And I think here is something the blueprint can point to as well, something which ENISA has worked on already, but like having a kind of an agreement or a playbook on how to deal with those kinds of situations. I think there's potential going forward in all directions.
Thank you very much. It's an interesting discussion, and I'm already looking forward to the following discussions that we will have. We have a meeting of the governing management board of ENISA, and with Peter, I'm sure we will have the meetings in the council. But as we are running out of time, I would like to ask if there are any questions from the audience to the panelists. If not, maybe if we still have those 4 minutes, because we touched here and there about ENISA's role, but maybe if you could shortly elaborate, how would you see ENISA's role within the blueprint? And here, maybe Peter, please start.
It's a difficult one. I don't know how many people from ENISA are in the room, but no, for me, it's ENISA is the oil between the 27 member states, maybe even the axis between the 27 wheels that are turning. Might not be a straight axis, trying to get all these different speeds, moving the whole vehicle together. And I think they are there to make the life of the national authorities easier, to make it easier for us to collaborate, so that we can have, another buzzword is the Team Europe approach, but I think they are the shell in which we try to move forward and really leverage the fact that there's 27 and more national authorities that are doing similar work in different places, and try and hash this experience and take the effort of working together a little bit out of our hands. And I want to especially congratulate what ENISA has been doing on the Cyclone Network, where they did something really great with the dashboard that they created. So national agencies can send in national reports about the situation that they have on national level with some multiple choice and open fields, etc. And ENISA created a tool that automatically integrated all of this information in a dashboard map that shows the situation in Europe. And I want to say this really helps us, not just on a European level to see what the situation is, this is the situational awareness, but also on national level to tell our politicians like, okay, we have this situation, in the rest of Europe, it's like this. And I think this is one of these prime examples, there's many more, on where they brought us together, made it much easier. And I think there's many more avenues that we can take together with ENISA to strengthen this collaboration.
Thanks a lot. Stefania?
I think that ENISA should have a much more active role on situation awareness, but maybe this point is much more related to the revision of the role and competences of ENISA in view of the new Cybersecurity Act, because, for example, looking at the military side, the military cyber crisis management architecture, we have an EU Cyber Defense Coordination Center envisaged by the EU Cyber Defense Policy that is just an institution in the middle, we can say, between the military network CERT and the conference cyber commander, in the sense that this coordination center should act like, you know, a fusion center collecting all information, providing to the conference military cyber commander in case of cyber crisis. So ENISA probably should have the same role, accessing also the information available to the Cyber Situation Analysis Center of the Commission. This, to me, is an important point, also because if we consider that the Commission, of course, has a role as observer within the EU cyclone, but in a particular case, as envisioned by Article 16, paragraph 2 of the NIS2 directive, it is an active member like any other member state in case of a potential or ongoing significant cyber incident that as or is likely to have a significant impact over the services and the activities falling within the, falling within the NIS2 directive purpose. So in that case, I think that ENISA should have a more operational role, acting as a fusion center of this information.
This is indeed the discussion that we have been having for a long, long time on the operational tasks for ENISA. What does it mean? What we want, what we do not want, and I guess this will feed into the discussions of the revision of the Cybersecurity Act, where ENISA mandate is, and we will be there in the lead of Fabienne, who is the chair of the management board of ENISA. So please, Fabienne, please share your thoughts.
Thank you. Maybe just very brief with regard to the time. I liked Peter's picture of the oil for the 27 wheels. That's a very nice one. So I guess in particular this role that ENISA fulfills is the secretariat function in the CSERT network, in the cyclone, which is so valuable, and this should be definitely strengthened. I already mentioned for the blueprint, the overview of the contact details is very helpful, and also I think I mentioned it in every of my statements, exercises is so important, and ENISA has a very good experience and does a very good job in that sense. And well, as a chair of the management board, I would like to stress one more point. The revision of the Cybersecurity Act has been mentioned. ENISA has been tasked with a lot of new things to do over the past years due to very different legislative acts from the European side. And we have to make sure that ENISA isn't overstrained, because they're doing a very good job, but we have to make sure in the revision that if they get new tasks, they also get the resources. So this is also a challenge for the member states and also for the Commission to take and to address this in the future for ENISA.
Indeed, in the end, you touched the most important thing, that you can have a lot of tasks, but if you don't have resources, it's quite impossible to meet them. And we are also discussing yet another instrument with the Health Action Plan, where ENISA, I think it's the most of the tasks are there for ENISA. So thank you very much. Our time, unfortunately, has ended. Thank you very much for this very food for thought, giving a lot of food for thought discussion. And looking forward to further discussions with you. Thank you so much.
Bardzo dziękujemy. Thank you very much. No i zmiana. Last but not least. Wraca wszechobecna dezinformacja. I także w kolejnym panelu, który już na deser naszego spotkania, Tym razem globalne zagrożenie dezinformacją, więc proszę nie uciekać. Dyskusja, którą poprowadzi pani Magdalena Wilczyńska, mówiłam, że wróci, a eksperci to Saman Nazraj, Givi Gigitashvili, Beatrice Marin Garcia oraz jej ekscelencja pani Catherine Godin, ambasador Kanady. Proszę o gorące brawa i zapraszam państwa na scenę.
We still need one more chair for our panelists. Oh, and yeah, okay. Good morning once again. I have a pleasure to facilitate this panel on FIMI, so foreign interference into Europe and global infosphere. We have really great panelists and also keynote speaker. Today we will discuss, together with Madame Catherine Godin, Ambassador of Canada to the Republic of Poland, Saman Nazari from Alliance for Europe and the great expert on SINT research, and Givi Gigitashvili from Digital Forensic Research Lab. But before we will start our discussion, I asked Beatrice Marin Garcia from European External Action Service, team lead and head of Data Knowledge and Analysis Center, to present the recent research on foreign threats. The report about that was published only 2 weeks ago, so we are more than happy to have your presentation here. And without further ado, Beatrice, the floor is yours. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sadly I couldn't be there with you in Poland, but thank you very much for the invitation. Also happy to see some familiar faces and so many members of the FIMI Defenders community discussing and exchanging ideas. I will start first my intervention by remembering how much it has been already done to counter FIMI activities, since it's a special year for the European External Action Service, STRATCOM. In 2015, it's been 10 years since the creation of the EAS STRATCOM. Since then, we defined the concept of FIMI, foreign information manipulation and interference, that puts the focus on the activities coming from foreign actors and also the focus on the analysis of the behavioral, the how are actors spreading this type of content in the EU and also outside of the EU. Other things that we did, we also developed a toolbox to respond to this security threat, and also we increased the regional coverage of the EAS STRATCOM. We started with the East STRATCOM task force. Since then, we also moved towards all the regions of the world, and we cover also Africa, MENA region, Western Balkans. Also, we cover Chinese activities. And we also put a lot of value and efforts into creating networks like the ones that you are creating also today in this event. Such, for example, the rapid response mechanism with the G7, also collaboration with NATO, the FIMI ISAC. At EU level, also outside the EU institutions, during these 10 years, we also created many instruments to counter together this threat, policy and legal instruments like the DSA, the Artificial Intelligence Act, also projects, funding projects with academia and civil society, networks of fact-checkers. I will briefly introduce the report that we published some weeks ago. As you might know, the EAS every year we produce an annual report on FIMI threats. And we believe that these reports are more than analytical tools. We want that these reports are also actionable tools, because we propose always a small part of the methodology to try to cover gaps and to standardize the analysis of FIMI across different partners. And also we proposed, I could hear some parts of the discussion before with ENISA, and we also proposed, and we're actually working on this field of trying to achieve that the analysis and the data sharing between partners is also connected to other domains, like, for example, cybersecurity, to have a better situational awareness. So like this, we are also more reactive to counter this type of threat. In the first report, we published what we call the FIMI methodology, that it's based on this standardization of the analysis, focused the analysis on the techniques and behaviors, the TTPs behind what we see in a narrative, and already proposing this data as sharing possibility. The second report that we published last year, we tried to answer the question, okay, now we know how to analyze FIMI, then how are we going to respond to FIMI? And there we published the FIMI toolbox, that is the catalog, let's say, of different instruments that we have at EU level, but also with partners in order to counter FIMI, from a better situational awareness to increase the resilience of citizens, also mechanisms to disrupt and regulate the content. And another key element of this second report was also, as we were going to have the European elections, how shall we be prepared in order to counter FIMI and disinformation targeting our democratic systems. Some weeks ago, we published the third part of the trilogy, where we tried to cover the question, how do we expose networks? The first element that we published, or that we include in this third report, it's what we call the FIMI exposure matrix. That this is a tool, let's say, that it can help us to extract indicators, to analyze indicators, and then connect channels and networks involved into FIMI activities to the infrastructure, or the attribute, or we can attribute them to threat actors. This way of categorizing the sources, categorizing the channels, helps us to give a terminology to actors that are attributed and they are openly connected to a threat actor. But also we have a way to catalog channels that have not been attributed, that we know that they interact in a systematic way and they are part of the ecosystem. So they have a clear role in creating content, but also amplifying and laundering content together with threat actors. We expect that this categorization system, this matrix, can help us to improve the responses in the FIMI toolbox, where we need to know the who is behind the operation. For example, we can have a better attribution of operations, also better labeling. We can expose more networks based on these behavioral and technical indicators. And eventually, for some of these cases, we could also apply sanctions against these perpetrators. Another section of this report is the most visual part of the report, and I hope you have access to, or maybe you saw it already, but I invite you to connect to the website of the EAS, or also on EU versus Disinfo, where we expose this galaxy of FIMI operations. It's a map of channels that they interact in different incidents that we detected last year. We detected 500 incidents. We extracted all the channels collaborating and playing a role in these incidents, and then we extracted the most active channels. So the graph, this visualization that you have available online, is the visualization of the activities of 2,000 online channels, so websites, accounts on different social media platforms, to see which role do they have in the ecosystem when it comes to the creation of content, the amplification, the laundering of content. And there are three main elements in this network graph. The first one is that we can see which channels belong to the backbone of the infrastructure of Russia and China. Then the second element is that we are also able to map which channels from Russia and from China are interconnected in an opportunistic way to launder or to try to push for narratives that are mainly anti-Western narratives. And then one of the most interesting elements is how these attributed ecosystems, they are connected and they rely on another layer of networks and channels, that these ones are not attributed. And we also used the metaphor of an iceberg. These are channels that they hide their connection to a threat actor. So in this graph, we can see how this amplification on how these connections happen at a behavioral and a technical level between what we can attribute and with other channels and networks that are not attributed yet, but by the collection of these evidences and information in the future, maybe we are able to attribute and be more reactive when it comes to the application of responses. I think there are some new elements right now in the geopolitical scenario that make our joint work more relevant than ever. The first one, we know the geopolitical environment has become increasingly hostile. There are more conflicts in our borders. And also, FIMI is used every time more and more as an element of hybrid warfare. FIMI threat actors systematically exploit these global events to expand their influence. And one of the examples that we put, or two of the examples that we put in the report, is a network of Russian operations in Africa and also in Moldova. And we can see how Russian actors, they use geopolitical or conflicts in the region or events such as elections to reinforce their digital infrastructure and their presence in the media ecosystem of these two regions. And examples of this also, how threat actors that use these events. We saw it, for example, with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And besides the cases of Moldova and Africa that I mentioned, we saw it recently with the past elections. Let's not forget that there are elections still ongoing during this year, so we need to remain vigilant and proactive to defend democratic institutions and these processes. A second element why our work is more relevant than ever is that also the environment is more hostile for researchers, for civil society organizations, and for information integrity advocates. They have difficulties to access to data to do investigations. They have less political and financial support, and also there is an increased questioning of their work. So
thank you so much.
That's why we need to continue working in this way. And the last part, and I will finish here, we are also seeing how our online ecosystem is every time more and more fragmented. It's easier to use segmented parts of the audience to foster ideological messages, reinforcing radicalization and polarization. And in this rapidly shifting context, the work to understand and to address FIMI in a collaborative way with different parts of the society remains not just relevant, but also indispensable. So that's why events like the one that you are having today and conversations like the ones that you will have in the next panel, they are a big instrument to work together and to counter FIMI together. So I wish you a very fruitful discussion.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and I really recommend looking into this specific report. It shows really a lot of connections, and it is really interesting read. I now would like to go to our discussion, and I ask also our panelists to present quick intervention on their work, their priorities, and their activities currently. And let's move from Europe to Canada. Madam Ambassador, could you present a Canadian experience in identifying and responding to FIMI? Recently, you published the conclusion of Public Inquiry of Foreign Interference. Would you share with us the results of the findings?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Magdalena. And I have to thank my co-panelists, Beatrice, Sam, and Givi as well. And I have to thank people who are in the room and still here on a Friday afternoon. As we close the deliberation and it's sunny outside, this is a really important issue, so I'm grateful you're here to hear our perspective. Beatrice was mentioning the fact that there are some elections going on right now. There's an election in Poland, everybody will know, but there's also an election in Canada. And right now, and the vote will take place on April 28th. And as a result, there are some constraints that I have with regards to our caretaker convention, which I'm hoping you can bear with me, because I can't take commitments for an upcoming government. But perhaps, yes, just to address your question and give a bit of a flavor of the Canadian experience, I'll call it the transatlantic connection today from our perspective. First, to speak to, Beatrice hinted at it a second ago, the G7 rapid response mechanism. So this rapid response mechanism was introduced in 2018 as a result of the G7 in Charlevoix. And it's really meant to be a mechanism that identifies and responds to diverse and evolving threats to democracy. So it's based in our foreign ministry. We work with other departments, but it's really housed as a component of our foreign policy. And it's really looking at the threats that G7 democracies are facing, working with other partners, countries, and observers as well. So we're really looking to address state-sponsored disinformation online and identifying opportunities for coordinated response, which is easier said than done, but still really important to do. And it's really a question of focusing on the digital information ecosystem and understand better how to detect, correct, and also call out malign activities and state-sponsored disinformation. So, of course, this is a global phenomena, as your title of this session pointed out, and it's well known here in Poland that there are some particularly hostile and disruptive actions taking place. And in that context, we've been in a position to call out on RT and call out on media that were not media entity, but actually arm of the Russian intelligence. And we've also condemned publicly Kremlin's funding firms like Social Design Agency and Structura, who run sophisticated, complex disinformation network. Many of you specialists that know much more about this field than me know that it's called doppelganger. So as a result of the G7 RM analysis, we've been able to understand some of the TTPs that are being used by Russia and really drill down and working with our in-house, but also our partners, some of whom are represented today. Perhaps just to address specifically your point about our own public inquiry. So we had concern that there was potential foreign interference in our 2019 and 2021 federal elections, and we wanted to just look into this matter. And so there was a independent arm's length inquiry that was conducted. It lasted a long while, from September 2023 to this January, where the reports were actually made public. And the Commission actually found that foreign interference did occur during those two elections, but not so deep that it would undermine the integrity of the Canadian electoral system. And as I told at the outset, we're having an election right now, so it was extremely vital that the work of the Commission be completed before that election. The Commission also concluded there's a multiplicity of actors that are present. I mentioned Russia briefly, but in the case of Canada, really it's the main perpetrator of foreign interference against Canada is really the PRC. It's really been demonstrated to be China, even if still we've seen some disinformation and FIMI by Russia and other countries as well. So there have been a number of recommendations made to amend how we do things, how we drill down. And one of the key ones, which is one of the reasons why I'm here really, is that our department, Global Affairs, should engage with like-minded countries. And we want to continue to conduct that type of dialogue with other countries. And in fact, we had the visitors of one of our senior officers coming from Canada to visit Poland only a couple of weeks ago to really try and deepen that conversation with Poland amongst other countries. So we do feel that we need to take active steps to not just look at this behind the curtain, but it's a bit like my interpretation. It's a bit like those of you who have been in the tube in London. You know, when it says if you see something, say something. There's a bit of that as well, where shining light is really important from an educational perspective. With society, media, literacy of what happens online. And this is really something that we're trying to do deliberately as we engage on this election. And perhaps my last thought, because I don't want to speak too long here, is to perhaps reassure and demonstrate that we're taking every step possible as we chair this G7 mechanism on an ongoing basis to be a really trusted and stable partner addressing FIMI on an ongoing basis. So that's a bit the Canadian perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Since the elections were mentioned and Doppelganger, a social design agency, I think it's a good time to move to Saman and his research on disinformation and FIMI before German elections. I know that he has some presentation. I hope we can put it on the screen, if that's possible. And if we need a minute, would you like to start or?
Yeah, sure. It's fine if we don't have the PowerPoint. Yeah, hi. So thank you for having us. So yeah, where to start? I think to give you some context, before the European Parliament elections, Alliance for Europe got together a coalition of civil society actors, media, academia, and fact-checkers, OSINTers, and so on, that were to work together on mitigating threats towards the European Parliament elections. That network then grew. Thank you. That network then grew and is now a stable structure called the Counter-Disinformation Network. Ahead of the German elections, a consortium of the FIMI ISAC got together to monitor FIMI threats towards the German elections. And we got together using the collaboration infrastructure and the rapid response infrastructure that we had put in place as civil society to kind of face some threats. During the elections, I had a list of organizations. I won't go through them, but we had very good contributions from German and international organizations such as ISD, CMAS, the German Marshall Fund's ASD, and so on, and of course debunk.org. These organizations came together and we found in total around 15 cases. I'm going to be summarizing them into 4 different operations. The first one, of course, is the Doppelganger influence operation. It's already been explored. I won't repeat what that is too much, but I can also say that what we did find which stood out, because Doppelganger is a continuous operation, and they've been doing the same thing since ages. It's astonishing that X hasn't done anything about it, and that Meta only now has managed to some extent seemingly mitigate it. But they moved to Blue Sky. And we very early on identified this move. We mapped out the tactics and techniques, reached out to Blue Sky's team, and together with Blue Sky, now they're no longer operating on their platform because we identified how they're operating and we killed their means of operations. We also found Operation Overload, which is an attempt to get researchers to waste their time on fake cases that have been created. We also saw that RT Germany had deployed, so ISD and GMF saw that they had deployed basically mirroring websites, alternative domains. They were using podcasting platforms to actually reach regular audiences in Germany as a way of circumventing the sanctions against them. And yeah, we reported on all of this, of course. And the most interesting case, I think, that appeared during this election was called Storm 1516, which is run by this fake human rights NGO in Russia that was founded by Prigozhin, so the founder of Wagner. And then that we believe is the continuation of the Internet Research Agency. So basically, this storm operation is quite complex. It's multi-stage. I think, beginning of January, end of December, journalists contacted us from Corrective about a report that they had published recently about 100 websites appearing in the German ecosystem. Most of them mimicking just outright, trying to look like news outlets. And a small minority of them we saw, like at least one of them that we could access, was trying to portray themselves as a recruitment website of the army and trying to portray a narrative that Germany is going to be mobilizing all of their adults and sending them to Ukraine to fight the Russians, to spread fear and hate towards the government. Other websites, and this is where AI comes in, and I would argue that this election was the first election in Europe where AI was used efficiently, because they were taking articles from a wide range of publications, including RT, rewriting the articles and publishing them on these websites using AI. So in a week, we saw 4,000 articles across these websites. In between them, which is where it gets interesting, they were actually writing proper articles, disinformative, manipulative articles, discrediting basically all the political parties in Germany, except AfD, so the far right. They were also using deep fake videos, mimicking politicians, creating gruesome scenes of, like, there was actually a real missing girl in Germany that had gone missing, and then they were claiming that a Muslim had killed her, and they made an AI video of this Muslim with a bloody axe or knife, basically, and so on. So they were actually properly using it. And then they were taking these assets, so the videos, the articles, text snippets, and influencers were then spreading this into the information space. So you had fake websites, fabricated websites, you had AI-generated videos, and you had influencers engaging and spreading this. And what we did is that we got the content from journalists, we then engaged, we did the research, and we exposed it, seeing, you know, what they were doing and how they're operating. We saw that two of the articles had been amplified by AfD politicians, which was really bad. And then we brought it to fact-checkers, journalists, and governments, who then, the fact-checkers fact-checked. The governments, you know, took measures that we do not know, but they took measures, apparently. And I think they did. And the platforms then also started taking down some of the assets. Most of them did, except you can presume which two did not. X and Telegram. So, and that's it. Thank you so much.
I know you're really excited about this case. I wonder whether something similar would happen in Poland really soon. So I would like to go to Givi and ask you about what you see in Europe, but in general, as approaching, analyzing FIMI threats, not only from Russia, but from other state or non-state actors.
Yes, I'll try to be short because we are running out of time, but I'm really happy that Sam actually did this overview of key threat actors and also the work we do. So I just want to offer one sort of like a critical assessment of our work and what Sam discussed. One common thing for all these actors is that, and then operations, is that they are conducted by non-state actors. These are PR firms, marketing firms, and this is one of the key trends. So before 2022, most of these operations were conducted by Russian intelligence services. After this, after the invasion, this is the work which is mostly outsourced, and different companies are doing this for money. And also good news is that the operations that Sam described are not really that efficient. They do not really manage to shape our perceptions and also behavior. But then this is the problem. The problem here is that the operators also know very well that their operations are not successful. But what is important for them is to keep money flowing into what they do from their clients. And at the end of the day, their key audience are not people who read these posts. The key audience are their funders. And this is the problem for us, because one of the performance indicators that they use for their funders is how many times we expose their work. And we have a real race who will expose yet another doppelganger activity in this country or in the context of specific elections. And then they basically document everything, and then they give it to their funders in Kremlin and other areas, in other places, saying like, hey, this is what we achieved, that the Guardian or other outlets wrote about us like 100 times during this election season. And then this is how they get money basically coming to into their business. So this is the downstream exposure, which I think is a bit too much on our side, and then probably we should consider doing something else. Second trend is that, and then there was a lot of discussions about cyber operations and cybersecurity during these 2 days here. And cyber activities are becoming an indispensable part of influence operations. A few years ago, most of cyber attacks were technical in nature, had nothing to do with propaganda or disinformation, but nowadays some of the most successful operations entail cyber disruption as well, meaning this can maybe the leaking, stealing sensitive information for the sake of leaking this later on. And in general, there is a really increased cooperation between hackers and activists, which we call hacktivists, who basically get the raw data from hackers and then they amplify these contents to push information operations. I want to continue, but I think I prefer to give a chance to Magda to ask questions and
Thank you so much, but I actually really wanted to hear your perspective, and I was really curious about this intervention, and I really liked your point on how not to make our success their success, right? So how to expose without exposing, how to respond without responding publicly. And I think that's the good starting point to discuss. Madam Ambassador, Sam also mentioned how they try to involve the government, media, different organizations. What is actually the best way to cooperate between governments, between countries, but also between, well, other institutions, academia maybe, or NGOs, in order to respond adequately and to have actually an impact?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that cooperation is really, really essential, Magdalena, because the approach is different and therefore complementary. So from a viewpoint of the government has the capacity to fund research, fund training, learning, and can use various strategies dealing with other governments as well to do lessons learned exchange, and basically cross-pollination with peers. The governments also have a responsibility to protect the integrity of their election system, and it cannot be expected that this is the work of civil society to do that. However, civil society, academia have different roles and tools, so they have a capacity to do advocacy, to do research, to be closer at the grassroots level and really work together and build that community resilience. So the scale of this problem is known to everybody in this room, and it's such that really those two things need to work together, because if we fail, effectively what we do is that we undermine, on one hand, the trust of citizens in the integrity of their own democracy. So that's a gigantic impetus, but it's also important to figure out how to address this problem, to create an appropriate defense, a robust defense against FIMI, with a view to protecting those democratic processes. Perhaps I can speak to one of the examples we have through the G7RM. We're funding some partners, and some of them are with us today. But one example that is perhaps useful to speak to is a project that was implemented by the Carnegie Endowment, which is called Information Integrity Ukraine. Some of you may have heard about it, but it's really a function of trying to combat Russian interference and operations in terms of hosting regular exchanges with international fact-checking networks, researchers, governments, and this partnership also advances literacy and hopefully connects Ukrainian CSOs with global stakeholders to really secure support from organizations like the good players in the field, the good corporate players. So the point is really to facilitate the training as well of civil servants so that they muster better skills. So there's a number of examples that have been given, but one that has been really very much on our mind and has not been seen very much outside the community is with regards to sub-Saharan Africa and everything that had to do with grain, and how this issue was really used to a nefarious effect. And so based on that experience, we really wanted to deepen cooperation. Thank you.
I still think there is one puzzle missing. What is the role of social media platforms in all of this? Sam?
Easy question.
The easiest question, of course. I mean, look, I would love to say that they are reliable partners, but we have over and over again seen that social media platforms are companies trying to make money. And to have them act, you need to have incentives in place to make them act. In some cases, that's them just feeling that this is a good PR move for them. In other cases, it's the opposite, that if they don't act, it's a very bad PR for them. So we had to have, we try to always have good dialogue with social media companies, but whenever that fails, we go to media instead. And then the media write about what we find, and then it creates an embarrassment, and we go to governments and regulators, and then we create pressure from the regulators, the media, the public, and so on, which then might result to them acting. But it's incredibly tricky at the moment in the current political landscape to work on a constructive way with social media companies, other than companies like Blue Sky, which are very easy to work with.
Sam mentioned the dialogue with the social media companies, and I'm extremely skeptical about this, and I think what works is the pressure, and not from the CSOs. Pressure should come from the governments. The key challenge for us right now in the open source intelligence is that we are losing access to the data of social media platforms, and this also kills a bunch of tools that used to be available for us to monitor what's going on these platforms, right? But the problem is that social media platforms simply do not want us to report on influence operations that take place there, because then they just think that this is a very bad thing for their reputation and for their image. But regulatory framework, I would say, is super crucial. And most importantly, it should be also not just focused on the European Union, but also there is a very uneven access to the data across the globe. We may have better access because of DSA, but when it comes to my colleagues outside of the EU, they don't have the similar, let's say, access. And even when we talk about DSA, it's very complicated. We can face punishments for scraping their data, and it's like the minefield. And then really complicated to really understand all the small pieces of this regulation. So one thing is for sure that platforms are not cooperating with us. And then if they don't see pressure, then they simply ignore us, and the access to the data is an indispensable part of our work. Without data, we can't do anything. And this is probably the main message, that please advocate for better data access for researchers with the platforms.
And it so depends on the platform, right? It's totally different with Blue Sky, with Telegram, right? And the scrapping tools are also different for different type of analysis. And apart from data, what are the biggest challenges when analyzing, not even addressing, but analyzing FIMI?
Should I start?
Yep.
I would say that measuring the long-term impact of FIMI operations remains to be the most challenging aspect of our work, simply because there are so many different factors that influence on our perceptions, on our beliefs, and on our behavior, that it's very difficult to actually see what portion of it was influenced by malign campaigns that take place in the digital ecosystem, right? And also some of the operations do not have immediate effect. Sometimes seeds are planted now, but an effect comes after several years. And then this is also some sort of cumulative thing. So it's like the gradual exposure to malign content leads into something after a few years. So we sometimes say that, and then I also just mentioned that bad actors actually do not really know if their operations are effective. But we have the same issue. We also can't measure effectiveness of our work. So we spend so much money on that, on fact-checking, on OSINT research, but at the end of the day, we really don't know if it's successful. At the same time, we don't know if the operations are successful, or we don't have the exact and good methodologies to measure these effects.
I think we face the same challenge when researching this information as, from actual sociological perspective, how to measure the impact. if the one tweet is enough, 10 or maybe 3,000, like when is the point where someone is actually starting to believe in this disinformation, and what other mechanisms are involved? And maybe coming from that, so we are after this 2024 mega election year. What would you say was the biggest lesson learned from last year that we should implement in our analysis, in our responses to FIMI, or to disinformation in general, domestically and internationally?
I'll just give a quick answer and let my co-panelists answer this. For us, what was really important is that when we see something, we need to speak to it. And we had an election campaign, and we saw that there was interference by some Russian actors during our campaign to a leadership in a political party, and which was really uncustomary for the risk-adverse people we are. There was an actual press release identifying, saying it was happening. And that is really important to contribute to education, but also realizing that these should not be niche conversations. So that was a behavioral change from Canada as a state. So that was an impact of what's been happening recently that we felt we needed to adjust.
I saw your hand.
I would say this is maybe not what is expected of the question, but what I really learned was that if we only focus on FIMI, or if we only focus on fact-checking, or if we only focus on OSINT, and if we work on silos in the way that I think a lot of us are doing, we will not win this battle. I think what I learned is that when we work together, when we had projects with fact-checkers, OSINTers, journalists, and academics working together, the products and the things that we can create are so much more impactful. It reaches more people, they're more insightful, and we can actually take the things that we're doing and actually bring them to a result. Like we can contribute to the DSA enforcement, we can contribute to having networks being taken down, such as the one in Blue Sky, but we also managed to have hundreds of sanctioned channels from the Russian state being no longer accessible in the EU or removed during this year. It's like working together like we have been doing has been incredibly impactful. That's a very, very happy learning from last year and from this year.
Again, one critical thought about FIMI. Last year I saw how FIMI framework collapsed in my own country, in Georgia. Because FIMI framework is fundamentally based on the assumption that national governments are responsible for protecting their information environments. But when foreign actors manage to manipulate domestic information space with the help of national government, then FIMI is no longer enough. FIMI institutional responses are no longer enough simply because it's the government which normalizes foreign interference. It's a government which basically uses sovereignty as a shield and then acts as a gatekeeper for foreign actors. And in case of Georgia, Georgian Dream managed to actually, let's say, brought strategically curated foreign narratives into domestic discourse and make it very difficult for everyone to distinguish what was domestic organic discussion and what was foreign orchestrated narratives, for instance. And again, FIMI needs national governments as partners, but when you don't have this and when foreign actors just simply use and act indirectly with the help of national governments, then society is not protected and FIMI is not the best framework to use to protect societies.
We say that the biggest success of this information campaign is when it goes into the streets, when people actually protest and use narratives in the normal debates, not only on social media. But I wonder what other techniques are successful. Techniques meaning TTPs, but also methods or new tools that are being used, especially AI maybe, that are being used by the threat actors to interfere in our democracies. And this huge question, last year we were asking ourselves, is AI only a hype? Or is it going to be actually successful in spreading disinformation and FIMI? What's your opinion on that?
I'll let the experts speak to this because I don't feel I have the knowledge to engage.
Okay. So as I just said, I think that one of the most successful methods for adversaries is to, when they manage to successfully blur the lines between FIMI and DIMI, foreign interference and domestic interference, malign interference into the space, because simply they are hunting on opinion makers, people who have great credibility locally, because they have a very good understanding of our information environment, so they know that when they use bots and trolls who are foreign actors, they don't get the same success rate as domestic people who are conveying their messages. That's one thing. And when it comes to your question on AI, I think that AI that didn't really have any short-term dramatic impact on integrity of elections. And if we compare AI and AI threats in this domain to certain disease, I would say that it's rather like the cancer than heart attack when we talk about AI threats which came into play in the context of elections, right? So they didn't really create new problems for us, but they made the existing problems way more difficult because they made influence operations and implementation of them much easier and cheaper for foreign actors.
I agree, but on top of that, I would also like to add the use of influencers and continuous infrastructure. Because if you have influencers, if you have a channel that you follow, you can create a bond with that, and they create a following, and they create a crowd. They create, basically, they can, if they reach a point when they become big enough, they can start co-opting regular people to do their biddings. In some of the cases that we've seen around influencers, they start driving their audiences to actually do stuff and to spread hate, to attack someone that they not agree with, for example. That's very, very powerful. So figuring out what these infrastructures are when we actually know that someone is hired by the Kremlin, for example, and by a sanctioned actor, and then being able to stop them from operating, I think is one of the very strong things that we can do. Because they're no longer just speaking or being a journalist, they're actually being an asset of a state. And then secondly, on AI, just to finish this very quickly, I think in a way, what we saw in Germany and what we also saw during the European Parliament elections, AI has become more of a tool than it was before. In the German elections, they were using AI to create these videos, and then these were getting some degree of spread in the German society. It wasn't massive, it wasn't big, but it's a start. They're experimenting, I think. In the domestic context, in Italy and Germany, Italy, and France, the far-right parties were using AI in their campaigns. And anecdotally, I know, when we were speaking with people in Italy, older people didn't see the difference between an AI image and a regular image, and they were believing the content to be real, or they didn't care if it was fake. They were, but how horrible that EU is forcing us to eat bugs, which is a narrative that they push. So I think we're at the starting point at the moment. I'm losing my voice. But yeah, it is to be seen how impactful it will be.
There are also new narratives, fake narratives on EU and food, mostly coffee. Look into that. We are over the time, so lastly, I would like to firstly thank you so much for this very interesting debate and for your daily work that you do analyzing and responding to FIMI. I know that we still, I think with each debate we share the same worries and the same challenges, not all of them. We have some new like influencers or in AI, but the challenges in cooperation, challenges in responding, and challenges of properly addressing FIMI and disinformation are still there, and I hope we will resolve it together one day and respond to it properly. Thank you so much once again, and thank you all for staying with us on this last panel.
Thank you.
Bardzo dziękujemy Państwu. Thank you very much. Drodzy Państwo, w międzyczasie tak zwanym zbliżamy się do końca naszej konferencji. Bardzo dziękuję za to spotkanie, a myślę, że podziękowania jeszcze Państwu złoży na sam koniec Krzysztof Silicki, dyrektor do spraw strategicznego rozwoju cyberbezpieczeństwa NASK-u, którego serdecznie tutaj zapraszam na scenę. Bardzo proszę. Jeszcze mikrofon poprosimy. Tak.
Hello. As we see, the Secure International Summit this year's edition is coming to the end. So let me say very shortly some closing words. This edition of Polish Secure Conference, which is, by the way, the conference with the oldest tradition here in Poland in terms of cybersecurity, was very special. Not only before this edition was a part of the special moment here in Poland because we have the presidency in the council, but it's special because of you, because of all attendees from different countries, and of course Poland, because of so very distinguished experts, speakers, and panelists. Some short recap. We observed that technologies are changing during all those years, but the threat landscape, cyber threat evolution, still continue to accelerate. So we discussed the cybersecurity here in many aspects. We discussed cyber initiatives in the EU, how to efficiently implement the current legislation, but also what about the future? What kind of strategic documents we would like to see, how they should look in the future, in the coming years. Probably one of the most discussed topic here was the cyber blueprint, not only during the panels, but also outside this room. And it's of course very important to, and I think helpful for further preparation of the final version of the new cyber blueprint, which is one of the most important deliverables planned by the Polish presidency. But other topics, there was plenty of them, like civil-military cooperation in cybers, like lessons learned from our colleagues from Ukraine. For instance, zero trust approach or proactive threat detection. Skills in cyber, how to develop them. The role of ENISA today and tomorrow. But we also introduced some new dimensions of the threat picture. One of the examples is fighting against the disinformation, like we have the panel, but before the presentation. The other aspect is how to securely prepare to the era of the quantum cryptography, which may be treated as a future challenge of problem, but we start to understand that we have to deal now. But what was very helpful for our discussions was opportunity to hear opinions from different perspectives. What I mean, it was the policy side, it was a technical side. We have today parallel session, more technically oriented, national perspective, industry, academia, public administration, military perspective, and many others. Thank you, speakers, panelists, very much for your active participation. And of course, many thanks to all participants for being here in the city of Bydgoszcz to discuss cybersecurity matters. My warm thanks go to my colleagues from NASK for the huge work they've done to prepare this conference, but many thanks also to our friends from Ministry of Digital Affairs, and last but not least also to our city of Bydgoszcz governors who, by the way, offered this beautiful venue for our conference. So thank you once again very much, and let's stay in touch for the future editions of Polish Secure Conference. By the way, there are still several copies of the annual CERT Polska report around, so please take it and read it. And last sentence in Polish. Dziękuję i polecamy się na przyszłość.
To jeszcze ja, panie dyrektorze, pozwolę sobie dorzucić podziękowania. Bardzo państwu serdecznie dziękujemy, całej ekipie NASK-u za przygotowanie tak fantastycznej imprezy. Zapraszamy na lunch i rozmowy kuluarowe i do zobaczenia za rok. Dziękujemy pięknie.